तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनम् कविभिरीडितम् कल्मषापहम् श्रवणमङ्गलम् श्रीमदाततम् भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जना. So the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the Master and Disciple, page 79. We will continue from the portion which we have just left in the last class. We will read that portion which we just studied, which we just read, and go for the discussion. So we find that that M is there, the author of the Gospel M. He is in presence of Ramakrishna, and Ramakrishna is asking him some questions, personal questions. And we found that how Sri Ramakrishna is reacting to it. And it surprises us. So let's go through it, and we will find that actually he was reacting in that vehement manner because he saw some good signs in him, that his life was meant for fully dedicating to the spiritual sojourn. He had a special role to play. For that, Ramakrishna, just seeing him, understood that. And so he wanted that his life should be exclusively for the spiritual endeavor. But when he found that he was married, so he shuddered. So let us read that portion and then we will go to the discussion. Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Ramakrishna, are you married? Aim, yes, sir. Sri Ramakrishna with a shudder. Oh Ramlal, alas, he is married. Like one guilty of a terrible offense, M sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the ground. He thought, is it such a wicked thing to get married? The master continued, have you any children? M this time could hear the beating of his own heart. He whispered in a trembling voice, yes, sir, I have children. Very sadly, Sri Ramakrishna said, ah me, he even has children. Thus rebuked, M sat speechless. His pride had received a blow. After a few minutes, Sri Ramakrishna looked at him kindly and said affectionately, you see, you have certain good signs. I know them by looking at a person's forehead, his eyes, and so on. Tell me now, what kind of person is your wife? We will come to that portion later. Just here we find that Ramakrishna is not actually discouraging anyone to become householder. He found some special traits. Ramakrishna had that special capacity. Just by seeing a person, by seeing certain physical traits, he could easily find out, as if scan the person's psychology and find out the bent of his mind. He found that Master Mahashaya, M had a spiritual bent of life. And he immediately identified him to be someone of his circle who is going to be a part of his mission. So naturally, he wanted that he should be a person of exclusive, who can devote his life exclusively for the spiritual endeavor. So that's why it's a very specific thing for Master Mahashaya. So we shouldn't, from this statement, from this conversation, we shouldn't judge Ramakrishna as if aversive to marriage. As he used to say, that when someone asked Ramakrishna, is marrying something, that you advise these young ones not to marry. That is marriage something not the plan of the God? And Sri Ramakrishna immediately used to say, have you understood that the entire the plan of the divine, that you are asking that way? So the main intention is what there? That as Swami Vivekananda used to say very nicely, that there should be a few whose life should be the sacrifice for the entire humanity. There should be a few who have that bent for the spiritual bent, who leads the life exclusively for the spiritual endeavor. To give an example, in engineering courses, in engineering college, there are so many branches. One of the branches is the computer science. You have electronics, electrical, mechanical, nowadays so many, this instrumentation, so many branches, civil engineering, architecture. But nowadays we find the application, without the computer application, we can never think of a single engineering branch. What to speak of engineering, even in any professional course, you go to the medical course, that to a certain extent, computer literacy is must. You have to have a know-how for any course you pursue. Then the question comes, then if all the courses have the computer application, what's the need for a separate branch for computer? That we all know that it is required. That unless there is a separate branch for computer science, we cannot think of the further research on those lines. That the more a few persons are there to just to study just the computer science and go on endeavoring to develop it more and more advancement is there in that subject, then only I can think of its application in all branches. So similarly in spiritual life, there has to be some who leads this life exclusively. We find throughout the history of the spiritual history that there are in all the religions, the prophets, the divine incarnations, who devoted their entire life for the spiritual pursuit. What to speak of divine incarnations? Even there are so many mystics, monks, whose life was meant only for this spiritual pursuit. Why? Because the revelations which come out from those lives, that's going to benefit the entire humanity. We all, whenever as a householder, a person has to resort to the spiritual journey, of course you will find that he or she is taking this resort, this recluse is taking is going and taking the help of someone who has devoted his life entirely for the spiritual pursuits. Because from their revelations, it's just like an application. Then only we can think of applying it in our day-to-day life. As still we remember that when someone asked a Swami, a senior Swami, that can there be not any, can we not practice spirituality while leading a householder's life? What's the need to become a monk? So he gave a very nice answer. That young boy was just a teenager. His beard and this mustache was just coming. They were just coming out. So the Swami just very jokingly asked, have you started shaving? So he told, yeah, I have started shaving. And then the Swami asked him, the blade which you use for shaving, do you use for cutting your pencil? Can you use it for any other purpose? No, I cannot, because I need the sharpness of that blade for the purpose of shaving. So Swamiji told, yes, similarly, if you just simply waste your energy or divert your energy in thousands of pursuits, how can you have the sharpness to lead an exclusively spiritual life? It is required, those who take this as a path, that the sharpness which we need of our intellect, the purity of purpose which we need, for that exclusiveness is something very essential. And Ramakrishna could identify. It's not that for everyone he had that same message. Throughout the gospel, we find that it is actually a scripture for the householders. So his message is, of course, there for the householders. But in M, he found that he has those traits for that exclusive spiritual life. But somehow he got married, he had children. So naturally, he cannot just give his entire focus on this spiritual journey. And that's why Sri Ramakrishna is repenting. And then what he's asking, the next question is very interesting. Tell me now, what kind of person is your wife? Has she spiritual attributes, or is she under the power of avidya? Avidya means ignorance. Now, M had the notion that anyone who has no academic knowledge, anyone who is not literate, one who is illiterate, is ajnana. So in that sense, his wife had no formal education. His wife, as such, was not literate. So his answer, M's answer is, she's all right. She's a very nice person. She's all right. But I'm afraid she's ignorant. And immediately again, we find the master rebuking. Was a master with evident displeasure. And you are a man of knowledge? There's the next immediate question. Are you a man of knowledge? So M had yet to learn the distinction between knowledge and ignorance. Up to this time, his conception had been that one got knowledge from books and schools. Later on, he gave up this false notion. He was taught that to know God is knowledge and not to know him is ignorance. When Sri Ramakrishna exclaimed, "And are you a man of knowledge?" M's ego was again badly shocked. So this is a very interesting thing. To know God is knowledge. To not to know God is ignorance. See, we use the word nirakshar for the one who is illiterate. But very interesting, in Sanskrit, the word akshara means that which is undecaying, unperishable. Kshara means that which is decaying. So actually, the one who has known the Lord has known the nirakshara. The one who is the one who is he has known the akshara, the one who is beyond the all sorts of decay, all sorts of death. There is no death, no decay in Ishvara, in God. God is ever existent. So the one who has known the akshara, how can he be nirakshara? Akshara means the Lord, the one who is undecaying. So that way we find that is a wonderful irony in our language. The one who knows God, if he is illiterate, we still say him nirakshara. So he's actually the one who is the real, he has known the akshara. How can he be the nirakshara? So that's why Sri Ramakrishna gave that indication that knowing God is knowledge, not knowing God is ignorance. That's the basic thing. In Sanskrit, in Mundaka Upanishad, we find that the knowledge has been distinguished as paravidya and aparavidya. Para means the highest knowledge and lower knowledge, higher knowledge and lower knowledge. What is lower knowledge? All the so-called academic knowledge, all our subjects are considered to be the lower knowledge. Paravidya yat aksharam adhigamyate. Very nicely, Mundaka Upanishad is mentioned, the knowledge by which we can know the akshara. So that's the knowledge which Sri Ramakrishna is speaking of. So are you the one who have the knowledge? So that's the things he is indicating, that don't think yourself to be learned just because you have learned a few books. That's the idea master had. And that's how we find his ego is shattered once more. So we find that as if there is a series of battering going on. Master Mahashaya later on reflected on it, that he was annihilating my ego. What was the need to annihilate ego in such a drastic way? Because Ramakrishna identified him as the one who is going to be the recorder of his words. So ego becomes a very detrimental factor in recording. Because as long as you have the ego, your own opinion, your own biases is going to tarnish the word of God, the gospel. It is bound to tarnish. So master once have identified, immediately he took it to point to batter his ego once for all, so that he becomes total humble enough to record the master's words totally untarnished. In the history of spiritual literature, the gospel is unique, where we find that the words of the prophet is in no way tarnished. It has been just written down just the way it came out from his lips. That's why it's the kathamrita. This amrita means, which is nectar. Katha means the words. This nectar like words were in no way tarnished. And for that, Ramakrishna is making it sure that ego has to be battered, has to be annihilated once for all. And then only the words can be recorded in a pure form. And that's what that process is going on. So again, he found his ego has been shattered. The master who is all compassionate, we find this first meeting is something which is quite contrary to the way he used to behave with the devotees. We never find him as a very hard taskmaster, a very sweet personality, ever compassionate. But in certain occasions, we find him to be quite rude enough. That apparent rudeness is to discipline his disciple. The disciple word came from discipline. The one who is disciplined is disciple. And that's the process which is going on. To make him the proper disciple, the disciplining process is going on. Master. The next question, still it is the shattering, the battering of the ego is still left. Still more questions are coming, and what the master replies on that is here. Master still has to wait for the rebuke which comes from Sri Ramakrishna. Master, well, do you believe in God with form or without form? M, rather surprised, said to himself, how can one believe in God without form when one believes in God with form? And if one believes in God without form, how can one believe that God has a form? Can these two contradictory ideas be true at the same time? Can a white liquid like milk be black? So M, being from an academic background, we find he is quite habituated to answer the multiple choice questions. Either yes or no, either A or B. How can a thing which is dark be white? A thing which is formless can have form. So he was a bit puzzled when the master said that, well, do you have belief in God with form or without form? It's not a question of belief. God should be either with form or without form. So, however, he was taken aback by such a question, but his reply was, sir, I like to think of God as formless. So kept the answer very, very short, cryptic. But the master immediately just responded to his answer. Very good. It is enough to have faith in either aspect. You believe in God without form, that is quite all right. But never for a moment think that this alone is true and all else is false. Remember that God with form is just as true as God without form. But hold fast to your own conviction. Very nice. So Ramakrishna is saying that both are true. It's very interesting. The Advaitin will say that all notions of God are your mental notions. They are not God. Advaitin will say all notions of God are God. How? Because God is finding expression through that notion. If everything is God, through that notion he is finding expression. And the more you are pure, the way he finds expression through your notion is more clearer. As Swami Vivekananda has very nicely defined God. What? God is the highest highest manifestation of the absolute. The absolute is manifesting as the entire world. but we find that manifestation palpably visible in the pure mind, in Shuddha mind. So when the Advaitin says that God is just when you just have a notion of God, that cannot be God because it is your notion. The Advaitin will say, when you have a notion of God, that is God, because God is finding expression through that notion. You cannot limit God. I cannot simply limit God by saying God is this and God is not that. If God has projected himself as the entire universe, how come he cannot manifest himself through the image? Is the image bereft of the divinity? If the divinity is everywhere, then it is me or my belief which is restricting the divinity in that image, as if he is everywhere apart from that image. So everywhere that God can be worshipped without form, and at the same time, when I take that the idea that God is expressing himself as this entire world, as in the Bhagavad Gita it has been mentioned as the Vibhuti, then anything, in anything I can see the manifestation of divine, and in that form I can of course worship. So Sri Ramakrishna, just in a very nice way, he's just saying that very good, it is enough to have faith in either aspect. You believe in God without form, that is quite all right, but never for a moment think that this alone is true and all else false. Remember that God with form is just as true as God without form, but hold fast to your own conviction. So after all, when you say God without form, that is also a notion. If I really speak of notion, when I say God is without form, that is also a notion. In some other place, Sri Ramakrishna is giving a very nice example. That's in the olden days. Now it is, of course, of the digital watch, our all times almost tally. In the olden days, that hand, that there's the watch with you has to adjust the time with your hand. All those hand adjustable watch. So there you will find in olden days, no one's watch time will tally with the others. Everyone has 1 or 2 minute difference. But Sri Ramakrishna is saying that all your household activity, all the school, college, university, all the places of the profession, your hospital, everything is running quite properly, though no one's watch tallies. So he's saying that as per the faith is concerned, no one's faith is correct. Even the one who says that God cannot be conceived, he's formless, that also is a notion. Everything is a notion. If I say God is avang manasa gocharam, then I have to myself go beyond the mind to realize that God. As long I am saying that God is without form, that also is a notion. So these notions, all the notions are correct, they are okay, if you intensely believe in it and start practicing. What Sri Ramakrishna is saying is wonderful. In some other place, you will find Ramakrishna will say a wonderful thing, that a person, a very simple person, went to one who was a guru, who is to initiate people. So this simple person went to the so-called guru and asked for a mantra. The guru, finding this person to be quite coarse, he thought that he has no such trait for spiritual progress. He repeated some useless words to him. But this person, that had total faith, he took that as the mantra spoken by the guru, delivered by the guru. He resorted to it, and he went on doing his spiritual practice based on that mantra, and he became realized. What's the idea? All the notions are just notions, they are not God. But when I hold on to it with full faith and I practice, it immediately entails a psychological programming. What's that programming? The very simple, all the spiritual journey. We start with a notion. Today's imagination becomes tomorrow's realization. How it happens? I start with a notion. That notion has nothing to do with the real God or real spirituality. It has nothing to do. However refined may be my idea of the divinity, still it's a notion. But when I believe it with full steadfastness and start my spiritual journey. My mind is becoming ekavritti. My mind is getting focused in that notion. That is helping me to get rid of all other notions. My mind is becoming ekavritti, the bahuvritti is falling off. And what happens then, as this becomes a habitual state, this ekavritti, at last, the more the mind is focused, it helps us to go beyond the ego. The concept of samadhi, you will understand how that the more the mind is focused, the more the other distractions falls off. In our day-to-day life, we find the more the mind is focused, the more the other distractions falls off. When I'm watching the news in the TV intently, someone calls, I don't hear. Why? As the mind has been taken away by totally taken by the program, by the news, which is being read in the TV, which is being the news, which is the channel which is on that my mind is so focused. Though the sound is entering my ear, it doesn't get connected to my mind. So the more the mind is focused, the other distractions falls off. You will find that one who is very passionate about this classical singing or playing musical instruments, you will find they get so focused that for hours they can be just engaged in what they're doing. They forget hunger, they forget thirst, they forget tiredness. The painter may be painting throughout the night. How it happens? They enter, in the modern psychology, they have entered into a state of flow. When they're so much focused in the thing which they like, all other things have fallen off. Even the body's alarm system, which finds expression in the form of hunger, thirst, tiredness. We have a biological clock with the alarm. The alarm sets in. And as a part of our mind is always attached to our body, we immediately feel the hunger, the thirst. But when you get extremely focused, the mind even doesn't have the capacity to take care of your bodily needs. The focus has taken away even the attention from your bodily needs. It is so focused. At last, what happens, whatever may be your belief, it can lead to samadhi if you're highly focused to your idea with full faith, with full devotion. How? The samadhi has been defined in our scripture as a state where you become one with the object of meditation. The triad of dhyana, dhyata, dheya, the one who is meditating, the object of meditation, and the process of meditation. This has collapsed. How it has happened? That even when my mind is extremely focused, the last thing to go away is the ego. I have the idea that I am meditating. A part of my mind always is taking care of my limited sense of this individuality. It is always there. It is like just the body, when you are just not spending any energy, you are lying down. Still the body expends some energy. They call it BMR, basal metabolic rate, to run your heart, to run your lungs, all those functions. Some energy is required. Similarly, to keep your psychophysical individuality intact, a part of your mind, the basal part of your mind, is always there to take care of ego. It never leaves us. In this meditation, which has become extremely focused, at last, that small bit of your mind, which is always there to take care of ego, that is also taken away by your object of meditation. And what happens? Immediately you become one with your object of meditation. Whatever may be the object of meditation. And the moment you become one with the object of a meditation, what has happened? The mind has fallen off for the time being. The moment the ego falls off, you have gone beyond the mind. So what your beliefs are not important. Any belief can take you to that state. And the moment that happens, immediately you go to the realization which cannot be spoken. Your mind has fallen off the prism which was breaking the sun rays into the spectrum, that has fallen off. All the spectrum have merged in the light. It takes you to a wonderful sense of unitary experience. If you are a devotee of Krishna, You may see Krishna everywhere. The one who is practicing Advaita, that I am Brahman, it may lead to the realization of that amness which is non-local. And the devotee will see the Krishna everywhere. But the idea is that what object of meditation has become something non-local, because the sense of locality comes from your ego. That's why Sri Ramakrishna very nicely in the gospel in some other place, when someone asked him that Ami mukta habo kabe, when shall I be free? Ramakrishna's answer was Ami jabe jabe, Ami mukta habo kabe. Ramakrishna was a master in playing with words. That same, that Ami, when shall I be free? His answer was, when I cease to be. When shall I be free? When I cease to be. That I is the only cause of bondage. So that's why what Sri Ramakrishna is saying is very important. Just these few words, but you will find that you may believe whatever, with form, without form, nothing as such is going to be detrimental for your spiritual journey. But what is needed is, but hold fast to your own conviction. That's the important thing. That just that do not make point that with my conviction, I will be using my conviction to defeat others, to constantly quarrel with others by justifying that my conviction is correct, yours is wrong. That is in no way going to lead us anywhere. As Swami Vivekananda used to say very nicely, the problem with the fanatics, that this is a type of fanatism who says that my way of belief is right, yours is wrong. The problem with the fanatics, Swamiji used to criticize in a very strong language. He used to say, what is the problem with the fanatics? Their condition is even worse than the canine instinct. Canine instinct means that of the dog. Swamiji is using a very furnished language, because he cannot just say that a fanatic's condition is worse than a dog. So he's using it in a very packed, nicely presentable way. There's canine instinct. That his condition is worse than a canine instinct. Why? Then he's giving that very nice example. The dog recognizes its master in whatever dress, in whatever makeup he may be. But the fanatics never recognize their master once he changes his dress. So once he comes in a different package, different format, he just starts howling at his own master. So fanatics' condition is worse even than the canine instinct, the dogs, how nicely Swamiji is saying. So here we find that the same idea is being how nicely being indicated by Sri Ramakrishna, that hold fast onto your own conviction. But Master M is yet to understand what Shastra is saying. So the assertion that both are equally true amazed him. He had never learned this from his books. Thus his ego received a third blow. But since it was not yet completely crushed, he came forward to argue with the master a little more. M, sir, suppose one believes in God with form. Certainly he is not the clay image. Master interrupting. But why clay? It is an image of spirit. So that's the idea in our scriptures, wonderful idea, Archavataram, that God is manifesting himself in the entire creation, but he manifests more. His manifestation, just the way sun's reflection is on the turgid water, is on a metal plate, is on some reflecting glass full of dirt, and is also on a reflecting glass which is clean. But where I find the reflection more prominent? In the clean glass. So similarly, God is everywhere, but in some places his reflection is more. His reflection is more in a realized soul, in one whose mind has already been purified, in the sadhaka whose mind has been purified, and in images. Out of his grace, he specially manifests himself. So never think the clay image as clay. It is the spirit, the special manifestation of the Lord is there. It is throbbing, it is vibrating, it is full of life. So that's why Master is saying, but why clay? It's an image of spirit. That's how Ramakrishna used to see the mother of Dakshineshwar. The Dakshineshwar Kali is not Mrinmayi, it's Chinmayi. When someone used to just say that such and such sculpture has sculpted the mother's image, Ramakrishna used to get annoyed. That how can a sculpture make the image of God. She is that all consciousness. So she cannot be as such the product of our, the sculpting. So, but why clay? It's an image of spirit. That's the concept of Archavataram. That's what Ramakrishna is speaking. M could not quite understand the significance of this image of spirit. But, sir, he said to the master, one should explain to those who worship the clay image that it is not God, and that while worshipping it, they should have God in view and not the clay image. One should not worship clay. Now the master, for the last time, is crushing his ego. Master sharply, that's the one hobby of you Calcutta people, giving lectures and bringing others to the light. Nobody ever stops to consider how to get the light himself. Who are you to teach others? He who is the Lord of the universe will teach everyone. He alone teaches us, who has created this universe, who has made the sun and moon, men and beasts, and all other beings, who has provided means for their sustenance, who has given children, parents, and endowed them with love to bring them up. So many things he's saying. The God's love, so that in our classes we again and again indicate that the mother's love for the children. Does the mother owe that love? It is the God who has given love in the mother's heart to take care of the children, his own creation. Similarly, the God has given compassion in the realized soul to come down from their realization and teach mankind. So it is the God's wish he is doing through his chosen disciples. So, but the one who has not realized, he just by his limited intellect, if he thinks that he will just go on explaining others, does that make any sense? It becomes just like the quarrel of so many people who have not tasted the mango, but have heard about the taste of mango from someone and have conceptualized with their fertile imagination the taste of mango. That when a person who really tasted the mango, he came and told a group of people who have not tasted the mango that the mango is sweet and it has a very nice flavor. So one thought that the mango is sweet like jaggery, and it has something smell like the rose. Someone thought, they're all conjuring up their ideas. Someone thought, no, it's as sweet as honey and it has the flavor of, say, jasmine. So like that, there are thousands of opinions, all just thinking that my opinion is correct and fighting with the others. What's the use of that? It's just creating noise. So that's why he's saying that it has become your obsession to give lectures. Who are you? The only one who has realized, and after realization also there's a question. Many after realization merges with the divine, finding that this world is after all a mere projection, doesn't have any inclination to continue with their life. Or a few by the will of the divine comes down out of compassion. As Sri Ramakrishna in some other place will give that example. The three friends were passing by the street and they saw a very huge wall. So they somehow managed to get a ladder. They were inquisitive to know that what's there on the other side of the wall. The one of them got up and he immediately was ecstatic, gave a huge that cry of laughter. He just had a huge laughter and jumped to the other side. He even didn't have time to relate what he has seen. So the second one, when he was climbing, the third one told that you also don't follow the same fate. Please relate what you see. If you have to jump, at least say what you relate and then you jump. But he also couldn't resist. He went to the top and what he saw, he couldn't resist. He was so ecstatic, he jumped to the other side. The third person now, the third friend, he was left alone. He also got up. He also felt like jumping on the other side. But now the thought came, if I jump, there is no one to relate what I have seen to the world, to the people who are staying on the other side of the wall. They don't know that what the mirth of joy is there. So out of compassion, he comes down. When he preaches, he has sinned. He's a realized person. He is the messenger of God. That words do have value. What's the use of the others just simply just preaching? So that's why Master, in those days, this shows what was going on in the so-called the civil society, the civilized society of Calcutta in those days. Everywhere, in the name of religion, so many movements were going on. And everywhere, the only religious practice, the only sign of religious practice was there's a lot of lectures were going on, and people were thronging to those lectures, attending those lectures with all sorts of peculiar deliberations, explanations, and discussions. That's what's going on. So Sri Ramakrishna, what he says, we find the reflection there of his words. We find reflection even in Swami Vivekananda's first visit to Ramakrishna. Just before that, he himself, after reading a lot of books, had that disgust, sense of disgust. Is it all the product of the fertile human imagination, all these so-called spiritual doctrines and all, or is there something really called God? So in those days, as in Calcutta, there were so many spiritual leaders. Narendranath, the future Vivekananda, he thought most probably I will get a satisfactory answer at least from one of them. And that's why he was visiting all the spiritual leaders with a question: have you seen God? If you also have read that Swami Vivekananda's life, you know. Nowhere he got that answer. Everyone was going to give him explanation. He told, I don't want explanation. I have myself read a lot of explanation. Have you seen God? No one could satisfy him. It's only Ramakrishna, when he came to Ramakrishna, that with assertion he told, yes, I have seen him. And not only that, I see him more clearly than I see you. And the third thing, I can show God to you. What more do you want? So what he's saying, these words are very, very significant. I see him more clearly than I see you. Why more clearly? Because when we are seeing the world, it is through our mind and senses. It is getting tainted. The sunglass of our mind and senses. But when you have realized God, you have gone beyond the mind, avang manasagocharam. For the first time, you are realizing something which is not tainted by your mind and senses. It is totally unadulterated. That's why our spiritual terms are very interesting. That spiritual realization is called aparoksha anubhuti. All our anubhuti, all our sensations are paroksha. With the help of mind and senses, I see the things. The spiritual realization is aparoksha. You see just without the need of any crutch. The mind and senses were like the crutch for you. You needed the support of it. You thought without that support, there is no existence for me. For the first time, you see that you exist by your own right. That crutch has fallen off. From there, when you come back, that realization is something which is more clear without any this clouding of your intellect. The intellect is not there. Senses are not there. So simple word, but it has a very, very deep significance. I see more clearly than I see you. I have seen God, but there's a distinction. I see God more clearly than I see you. And there's a way of showing it. There is a process. I can show it to you. So that's the thing. And that's the be all and end all of spiritual journey, not those mere discussions. And that's the thing Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. He who is the Lord of the universe will teach everyone. He alone teaches us. Who has created this universe, who has made the sun and the moon, men and beasts, and all other beings. How he teaches us? Now, as for us, all the spiritual knowledge is available. We think that it is the guru who has there to teach me. But when for the first time man had the realization, when the religion started, from whom he got the inspiration? So in the Yoga Sutra they say, Sa purvesham api guru kalena anavachedat. that the Lord himself is the Adi Guru. You will find that we can never be satisfied with the life, with our urge for pleasure, for happiness in this life. That urge itself, though it is taking us first to the sensual enjoyments, you can never be satisfied by that. At last, you will be disgusted, and that same search for happiness is bound to take you to the Lord. So the Lord has devised the plan in the world in such a way. He is the ultimate guru. Even if no guru is there, that human urge for getting that unadulterated happiness is bound to take us to that ultimate spiritual realization, even without any help. That urge will come one day, it will take us. That's why, because God has created the creation in that way, you have ultimately to turn around to taste that divine joy. And that's why he's saying he's the ultimate guru. He alone teaches us, who has created the universe, who has made the sun and the moon, man and the beasts, and all other beings, who has provided means for their sustenance, who has given children, parents, and endowed them. He has provided the means for sustenance. As we were in the last Gita class, we were indicating that in the Gita, when they speak of yajna, that very nice sequence they're speaking of, that yajna, what? That sometimes we don't understand because we take it in a limited sense, that the beings came from food, that all the living beings, we need food. Food came from rain. Rain came from karma, from yajna. Yajna came from karma. Karma came from the imperishable Brahman. So sometimes we think that when drought is there is drought, so we have to do some yajna. Yes, in India we found that when drought is there, they will be doing yajna, that with the desire that with the intention that there will be huge rainfall. But actual yajna was going on even the human took birth. What's the real yajna? Yajna means interdependence. That once the vegetation came, the plants came, more than 50% of the evaporation, that's evapotranspirators, the cloud is formed. More than 50% of the cloud is formed by the trees, not the ocean water, not the water bodies, not the cultivated fields. It's the water which is drawn from the deep, from the ground, and again evaporated through the plants. That's the cause of rain. And that's the yajna. That's the real yajna the divine has planned. That's why in Gita, God is saying that I am Adhi Yajna, I'm the Lord of Yajna. Even before we came, that yajna was going on. And that's why when the vegetation, everything is there, then only we can think of the origin of the human life or any other life which is crawling on this earth. He has already created that sustenance. It is all his divine plan. So who are you, being a mere creature, to think that you will be explaining others? So how nicely in this word, Sri Ramakrishna is thrashing his ego. He's endowed with that he has endowed the parents with the love. The Lord has done so many things. Will he not show people the way to worship him? If they need teaching, then he will be the teacher. He is our inner guide. As we were saying, as the inner guide, with our search for the pleasure, he is gradually leading us to that ultimate goal. Suppose there is an error in worshipping the clay image. Doesn't God know that through it, he alone is being invoked? He will be pleased with that very worship. Why should you get a headache over it? You had better try for knowledge and devotion yourself. Behind all these words, so much of scriptural these subtleties are there. That does the Lord doesn't know that it is he who is being worshipped when you are worshipping a clay image? Sri Ramakrishna himself in another place gives a nice example, that if person has 5 children, the youngest one who is yet to learn, he is yet to develop vocabulary, he just speaks a few words. The others very nicely, some call father, some call papa, dad, all those things. And the small one, the infant who has just learned to walk, he somehow just say one syllable, pa, nothing else. Does the father get angry with him? He knows, after all, he is calling him. The same emotion is working, the same love is working for that young one also, though he has not learned the language. So does God doesn't know that after all, he is being worshipped through whatever means it may be. In our scripture, there's a very nice idea of ahang graha upasana. It's a very nice idea that resort to worship in any way you like, as long as the urge is something which is guaranteed. You have the urge, any mode can take you to the spiritual evolution. What's the idea of ahangraha upasana? Very nice. With an example, we'll try to understand. That suppose a doctor has 4 children, 3 or 4 children. After his work throughout the day in the hospital, he returns home. He's wearing a white coat. He opens it, keeps it aside. He keeps the stethoscope aside. He opens his shoes. And all these little children, they come running. One will take the coat, wear it, and move around the house as if he has become the doctor. And one will take the stethoscope and place in other's chest, feigning he is the doctor or she is the doctor. And the smallest one will come and wear the shoes. The children never wear their own shoes. They will always be wearing their parents' shoes, the big shoes they will wear and move around, as if he has also become the doctor. All want to identify with their father by wearing the coat or by taking the stethoscope or wearing the shoes. These are all childish acts. Just by wearing the white coat, you don't become a doctor. Just by keeping the stethoscope in others' chest, you don't become a doctor. Or wearing a doctor's shoes, you don't become a doctor. But the father is happy, very happy. He knows by all these childish acts, all these children are developing a motivation to become a reputed doctor, a very responsible, reputed doctor in future, through all these childish acts. So what you're doing is not important. What's the real motivation, the urge behind all those activities? So that way, all the rituals are okay. Even the wife need not know the husband's way of worship. The husband need not know the way of wife's worship. That's the concept of Ishta Upasana in our culture. That your Ishta, the way you like you worship, it's all okay till you have as long as you have the urge, the real urge for that spiritual evolution. All will lead to the same goal. So suppose there is an error in worshipping the clay image. Doesn't God know that through it, he alone is being invoked? He will be pleased with that very worship. Why should you get a headache over it? You had better try for knowledge and devotion yourself. So that's the things Ramakrishna is stressing. That whatever you believe, with that, have the urge for the knowledge, for the devotion. That alone entails your spiritual evolution. This time M felt that his ego was completely crushed. He now said to himself, yes, he has spoken the truth. What need is there for me to teach others? Have I known God? Do I really love him? I haven't room enough for myself in my bed, and I am inviting my friend to share it with me. I know nothing about God, yet I am trying to teach others. What a shame. How foolish I am. This is not mathematics or history or literature that one can teach it to others. No, this is the deep mystery of God. What he says appeals to me. So gradually he's getting drawn towards the master. So this shows the humbleness of M, that he really had some substance. Some other might have, after this rebuke, might have never visited him again. He had that substance to really realize the worth of those words and be humbled. This was M's first argument with the master, and happily his last. So after that, we find that master, this M has accepted the master as the friend, philosopher, and guide who is going to lead him to the goal which he is hankering for. The master, you were talking of worshipping the clay image. Even if the image is made of clay, there is need for that sort of worship. God himself has provided different forms of worship. He who is the Lord of the universe has arranged all these forms to suit different men in different stages of knowledge. And then Ramakrishna gives a nice example, that very common example. The mother cooks different dishes to suit the stomach of her different children. Suppose she has 5 children. If there is a fish to cook, she prepares various dishes from it pilau, pickled fish, fried fish, and so on to suit the different tastes and power of digestion. Taste and power of digestion. The taste for a particular spiritual path, and that also power of according to the digestion. If you are initiated and ask Guru how much time I should do japa, he will say at least 108. He won't say do 1,000 times or something. At least he knows that at the very beginning, if I keep some very big goal, that will derange my mind, nothing else. Just the way the one who is going to the gymnasium for the first time and seeing other just using the dumbbell, just fletching his muscle with the dumbbell for 100 times and tries to imitate, what will happen? The muscle will simply, there will be a cramp and he will be hurting himself, he will be injuring. He has to develop the strength gradually. So here also the power. Some may have a weak digestion. Mother will not give him something strong to eat. They will give something light. So in spiritual journey, we find the challenges increases the more we evolve in spiritual life, because God also increases the challenges gradually as per your capability to bear with it. So sometimes we say that when someone has evolved so much, why should he go through all the challenges? The God actually as a blessing gives those challenges, because that's the way we can quickly get detachment. But he won't give the challenges to a person who is not up to it. That's why Swamiji used to say, Jato uchcho tomar hridoy, tato dukkho janibe nishchoy. If you are facing a lot of challenges in life, take it as a blessing that God somehow have understood that you can deal with it. You can deal with it and outgrow yourself from all the challenges, because that's the only way of detachment. There's a story of this Krishna's life, which apparently appears to be very rude, but it speaks something wonderful. That Krishna in the disguise, along with Arjuna, went for begging one day. The first house they went is a rich man's house. They went and they asked for some alms. The rich man just abused them, verbally abused, and asked them to just move out, get out. While going away, Krishna blessed that person, that you be more wealthy, be more, have more name and fame, be more wealthy. He blessed him. Arjuna thought, okay, God after all is compassionate. He blessed him. After that, they went to a very poor person's house, peasant's house, poor peasant. He has only one son. Wife has passed away. He's very poor. He invited. That poor man invited whatever meals they had, they shared with Krishna and Arjuna in disguise. And while living, apparently for no reason, Krishna became very angry and he cursed him that your son will die. Arjuna was baffled. He never understood what's going on. And when Arjuna came out and asked out of surprise that why, that the previous man, he never in no way showed us respect. He was abused us and you blessed him. And this poor person, so devoted, so nicely he served us. And suddenly for no reason you got angry and you cursed him. And what God told is something, it may really, because we are also so attached to the world, it may appear to be very harsh, but it speaks something. If we take it that way, it speaks something wonderful. He says that he's already highly evolved, spiritually evolved, that his son is the only last bondage. I want to take it away. In spiritual life, they say God is the most jealous God. In the Bible, they say that God, when you say, I love God, he's very jealous. He will make sure your love is not in any way shared by others. He's very jealous. So the more you grow spiritually, sometimes you find the challenges are increasing, but sometimes it can be a blessing. Just with a story, I will end today's class. You know, when I joined in some center in India, and there one lady from America was staying there in the center to just to serve. She was doing her own spiritual practice and was serving. She was quite old. Very nice lady. very, what you say, always indrawn, wonderful behavior, motherly attitude. So we all, as brahmacharis, also felt very free with her. So nice she was. And suddenly she fell ill. She was quite old and she had to be hospitalized. And when she was in hospital, she understood that she is not going to live long, that the death is nearing. So then suddenly she had that intense urge to meet her daughter. The daughter was in States. So she somehow, in those days, mobile was not there. She just asked us, requested us, can you arrange a phone call? So we somehow arranged the phone for her, a phone call. She called her daughter, but the daughter was quite rude. She told, you left us for years together. You never remembered us. And now suddenly you're asking me to come over to India. It's not possible. See, if we were not spiritually evolved, it would have shattered us. Just, I know I'm going to die, and this is the last response I'm getting from my daughter. It would have shattered. But that lady was really quite evolved. Calmly, she kept the phone, and how nicely that we still remember what a wonderful remark she told, that before my death, God is taking away my last attachment. So that's the wonderful way she remarked. So God has his own way. We don't know. So it is he who is taking care of us. In what way he will crush our ego and take us to the spiritual journey we can forward, we don't know. The apparent challenges of life may really prove to be blessing if we have the proper perspective, proper vision to see it. And that's what his master is indicating. So we will continue with the discussion again in the next class. With this, we stop our discussion today. Thank you all. Namaskar.